Council, officers of the Council, ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for His Worship, the Mayor of Nuneaton and Bedworth, Councillor Martin Walsh.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. Thank you. I'd like to welcome you all to the final full council meeting of this municipal year, dated the 17th of April 2024. There is no fire drill expected, but if the alarm does sound, would you please exit by the door which you entered or by those doors clearly marked with a fire exit sign. Please do not use the lift, use the stairs, and we will accumulate across the road outside Lloyd's Bank. This meeting is being recorded for future viewing on the council site, so if you please turn your phones off or onto silent, that'd be appreciated. Thank you. Okay. Item 2. Apologies. We have apologies currently from Councillor Beetham and Councillor Downs, I believe. Do we have any other apologies? Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies for Councillor Neil Phillips.
Thank you, Councillor. That will be noted. No other apologies? Thank you very much indeed. Item 3, we have minutes of the previous meetings. We have the minutes of the previous meeting of the 21st, the extraordinary meeting, which is on page 6 of your agenda. Are we all happy with that as being the true and accurate record thereof? Yes. Okay, in which case I shall sign that off. Thank you. We then have the minutes of the meeting, the full council meeting as of the same date. The revised copy of the minutes is in the addendum. Are we all happy with that as being true and accurate record thereof? Sorry, yes, Councillor Condacor.
Mr. Mayor, I'm more happy with the original version. There's actually a better transcript of what happened. And clearly, we had a question and then we had a supplementary being asked, which you cut off halfway through. But I think the original minutes actually reflect what happened, that Mr. Walmsley was making a point about other people having the whip removed temporarily and then reinstated. And I think the minutes should read as in the paper edition. And I therefore move that as an amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Condacor. Councillor Condacor. At that point, when Mr. Walmsley requested a supplementary question, I allowed him to speak, but it was obvious after the first couple of lines it was not a question, it was a statement. So given that, and we're allowed to put in, as per, with legal representation, we're allowed to put it as stated in the revised minutes. Brent.
Just by way of further clarification on that, the Constitution absolutely does not allow for a supplementary statement. It only allows for a supplementary question. And so that the revised draft of the minutes makes that clear, that the supplementary statement, in effect, should not have been made at all. So that is what the revised minutes are now reflecting. The Constitution, crystal clear on that. So that's why the revised minutes have been sent out.
Yes, Councillor Condacor.
Mr Mayor, I was under the impression that Mr Walmsley was going to get to a question, and I actually have requested a vote on keeping it in the minutes. So if Councillor Wright is happy to second that, can we take a vote on that, please?
Okay. All those in favour of the minutes as standing as in the full agenda that we have currently? In favour?
No, I moved an amendment first, so you should take the amendment.
Okay. You wish to make an amendment to the revised minutes?
Yes, put them back as they were.
Is that not really what I just said? In a roundabout way? So, we'll take a vote on those who wish the original minutes to stand. All those in favour? Yes, indeed, we will do so. Those against? That is lost. So, can I please have someone to approve the minutes as stated in the revised version? Thank you, Councillor. Someone second? Thank you, Councillor Clark. I will sign those off. Thank you. Oh, sorry, we'll vote on that one. Apologies. Take a vote. Those in favour of accepting the revised version? And those against? Yes, we will. Yes, we will. Again, that's passed. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Declaration of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest that are not listed on the current schedule? No, we're okay with that one. Thank you very much. Okay. Item number 5, announcements. I have one announcement myself. We have one major fundraising event for my appeal, which is the ABBA Tribute Night, which I'm sure you've seen posted. It is on May the 10th at the where is it? Windmill Club. No, it's not the Windmill Club, is it? The Pavilion, sorry, the Pavilion Club. So anybody who wishes to join us and come, by all means contact us and we have tickets. I believe, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have 2 announcements. Firstly, it is customary at the full council before an election where there are councillors who are standing down to actually record and pay tribute to them and the service that they have given to this council and, more importantly, their residents. So, in no particular order other than that this is the order they were elected in, Mr Mayor, I will go through the list. There is, of course, Councillor Neil Phillips, who is not standing. He was first elected in the 2006 elections, and he served as mayor between 2011 and 2012. And I know that he did a lot of work for his charity that year and raised a significant amount of money, which everyone on all sides of the chamber, I'm sure, will be pleased that they supported in one way or the other if they were available. And also, he did serve for a number of years as a cabinet member under the previous Labour administration and as deputy leader. Now, I might disagree with what he may or may not have done, but it is still service nonetheless, and knowing how intense the roles are, I certainly pay tribute to the amount of effort and hard work that he put in. We have Councillor Condacor, who was first elected in 2012, and he is standing down. Then we have Councillor Rob Tromans, first elected in May 2014, and of course was the first Conservative mayor of this administration between 2021 and 2022. And he did a lot to restore, particularly after the COVID hiatus, Mr Mayor, the fundraising activities of the mayoralty, and I know subsequent mayors, Councillors Clark and your good self, have benefited from what he put in train. Then we have Councillor Evans, first elected in 2018. I personally wish that he was staying longer because at such a young age he has a lot to give, but I think we know his reasons, which are, in my view, despicable to be anyone to be hounded out of office. And is completely unacceptable. but the work he did as a portfolio holder, even in his short space of time, will leave a lasting legacy in Bedworth, that we will have a new physical activity hub, and Councillor Evans very much deserves a large part of the credit for securing that funding, and I hope he'll be proud of that once he has left serving this council. We then have Councillor Mandy Tromans, who was the mayoress for 2021 and 2022, but was first elected in 21. And again, with Councillor Rob Tromans, did a lot to re-establish the mayoralty following the COVID hiatus. And again, I know she really enjoyed both the community aspect of being a councillor, but also the community role of the fundraising that went with that, and supporting underprivileged children, adults, and the charity sector. Then we have Councillor Brett Beetham and Councillor Brian Hammersley, both elected in May 2021. And then we have Councillor Joy Coventry Morton and Graham Morton, and Emma Shires, of course, from the latest intake from May 2022. May, whatever you do in your future, I hope you are successful and enjoy whatever role you have lined up. My second announcement, Mr. Mayor, is actually hot off the press. So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to give an update on transforming Nuneaton. It will have escaped no one's attention over the past few years that we have seen a massive economic shock, not just in the UK but across the world. We've had the shocks of COVID, Ukraine, and the resulting inflation and interest rate rises. Many residents will have seen the cost of living increase, and the prices of items are now higher than they were a few years ago. The council and our regeneration programme have been affected just as much as domestic budgets have. This has meant that the budgeted costs of the Transforming Nuneaton projects have increased from the original models of 2018-2019. So, as the economic situation changes, we must adapt to it. We took the difficult but necessary decision to pause, and I emphasise pause, some projects and focus on the essential projects Nuneaton needs to see through a real programme of transformation for our town. In February this year, we asked government, through our Pathfinder status, to reallocate funding from projects that are less of a priority to those which are essential. Yesterday, I was delighted to receive confirmation from the Department for Levelling Up that they have agreed to our request, and the regeneration funds that we have secured from government can be reallocated to the projects that will make the biggest difference. This means we will be proceeding with Grayson Place Phase 2. Once the hotel is finished, we will start on the cinema, food hall, college campus, and refurb of India Red. Officers have already been instructed to get on with the job and already are working with our partners to green-light the projects and sign the contracts as soon as possible. We will be able to progress a revised bridge to living on Bridge Street, which, with the planning permission granted last night for a new library and business centre, means that Bridge and Church Street will also be a key part of the plan to transform Nuneaton. And I emphasise the word plan, Mr. Mayor, because it is only the Conservatives that have a plan to overturn decades of Labour failure and decline in our town centres and invest for the future. We pledged to crack on with the regeneration of Nuneaton. Promise made, promise kept, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. We move forward to item number 6, public participation. We have 2 questions. Mrs. Condacor.
Thank you. It is a real loss to Nuneaton that the planned expansion of the museum and art gallery has been halted without any public consultation or even consultation with elected members. With the shrinking of retail in all towns, we need to be encouraging footfall to our towns by other means, and this would have been an excellent opportunity to promote Nuneaton and attract people to come and visit. Whilst I understand that things cannot go ahead if the money is not available, I do not understand why the project expanded to be a 2-wing extension as opposed to the original 1, if it was known that only a finite amount of money was available, and seemingly without knowing if this would still be affordable. The plans for the extensions were obviously developed by architects and then went through the planning process. How much money was spent before the programme was abandoned, including all architect fees and planning fees? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Condacourt. I call upon the leader.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mrs Condacourt has actually highlighted the central issue in her question itself. The economic climate has changed since the original business cases for the transforming Nuneaton projects were approved. We have faced the impacts of COVID, the war in Ukraine, and inflation and interest rate increases. Simply put, it means that the cost of our transformation projects has increased since they were originally costed years ago. That means we must take difficult decisions and reprioritise our projects so that we spend the money we do have wisely. Prioritising Grayson Place, including the cinema, food hall, college and India Red refurb, and Bridge to Living is critical to the regeneration of our town centre. The museum has only been put on hold. All of the work we have done can still be used in the future, and we will continue to look at other funding sources for the museum. I can confirm that the total costs have been £145,000 to date. And I want to address head-on, the project wasn't expanded to a two-wing extension, it was amended. The original plans had a one-sided, two-storey extension that was completely out of keeping with the design of the museum. It would have been cultural vandalism to proceed with a design that failed to honour and respect the architecture of the main building. Look at the museum head-on. It is clear for all to see that it is designed in a symmetrical design, as is the park itself. A one-sided extension would have destroyed that symmetry, and I would not sign up to something that would ruin the design of the original building. We either do it properly or not at all. I make no apologies for that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Please.
If it's relevant, yes.
Yeah. With all the schemes that were in the Town Deal Fund, why were contingencies not built into that? It seems ludicrous. If you do any work on your house, you would allow for things costing more than you expect. So why was no contingency put in for any of these things? You've been on the board of the Town Deal since its inception, and you haven't attended a meeting since March 2022. So, you're not keeping your finger on the pulse.
Thank you, Ms Condacourt. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In fact, I have sent substitutes to that meeting as it meets during the day. Unlike some people, Mr Mayor, I'm not a full-time politician. I have a job. A number of people actually have full-time jobs, unlike some, and they have the luxury of being able to be full-time politicians. I cannot live off the salary of a councillor, Mr Mayor. In fact, no one around here, unless they are retired and have another income, can actually afford that. So if she wishes to be a full-time politician and not have a full-time job, that's her decision. That's your decision. You have the money to do that. Don't go criticising other people who still need to work for a living. We still have something to contribute to public society too.
Mrs Condacourt,
Councillor,
please.
Mrs. Wannabe Councillor Condacourt misses the central issue. Even on the leader's salary, you cannot afford to run a full house, all your other day jobs, all your other expenses. She might be able to on her retirement salary, but I'm of the generation that has to work hard for our retirement. Now, in terms of the funding itself for these projects, I remind her that the projects were first put together in 2018-19, as was said, and there were contingency funds in place which were built in 2018-19, but unless she has been in a coma or absent for all these past 5-6 years, anyone who has any sense whatsoever will know that there has been the Ukraine war, the impact of COVID, and the fact that interest rates have increased and the inflation has increased. What we could pay for with, say, £1 back in 2018 now costs us £5–10 now. For example, Mr Mayor, just on the market. Pre-pandemic, if we needed a new table for the market, the suppliers, we could get it for 25 quid. Now, to get a replacement table, when someone nicks our tables from the market, it costs us 75 quid for a new table. Now, unless she's telling us that the whole world has stopped and that nothing has gone up since 2018, 2019, and that everything has stayed exactly the same, then she should be honest enough to actually face the reality that these things have gone up and we have to act accordingly. Otherwise, we would bankrupt this authority, and that would be the result of a Labour or a Green administration come May if they win.
Thank you, Councillor.
Can I ask this to get referred to the committee, please?
No, no.
The Constitution says an OSP can look at it and vote.
It needs to be voted on.
You can ask, yes it can, but obviously it will need a seconder and then we'll go to a vote.
Mr Mayor, can I request this item on the future of the museum goes to a suitable OSP? Thank you.
Those against the motion? That motion is lost. Okay, we have a second question. We have a second question from the public. Mr. Ratcliffe. Thank you, Mr. Ratcliffe.
No, it's on.
Thank you. May I please ask Councillor Croft what the Section 106 money has been spent on?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Ratcliffe. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Mr. Ratcliffe for his question. He asked a very high-level question, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to give him a very high-level answer, because over the years, this council has had many hundreds, if not thousands, of developer agreements under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act, concerning many thousands of projects and millions of pounds. So without being more specific in the question, it would be difficult to pull that data together to give a precise answer as to what monies have been spent on, because, like I say, there are thousands of projects and budget line items. To give him some background, Mr. Mayor, it must be understood that Section 106 money is earmarked for particular purposes, which are identified in the planning documents and developer agreements at the point of application and at the point of approval. There aren't sort of random pots of money that can just be drawn down on according to popular demand. That has to be understood in the record. Very often, these monies will contain trigger points as part of the developments, so they will only be paid over to be spent when certain phases of construction are reached. So the fact that development is happening does not mean that money is immediately available to spend yet. Under the monies that MBBC spend, Mr. Mayor, we spend them on parks, open spaces, play equipment, sports facilities, that sort of thing. That's specifically what it's spent on. But it's not just paid to MBBC, we also pay it over to our partner organisations at the County Council and to the NHS to provide services, and that's in addition to the obligations under Section 106 to developers to provide affordable housing, which Councillor Smith will be able to tell you all about. But to give him some high-level figures, over the past decade, we've received £5.5 million of Section 106 money. We've spent just shy of £1 million, 977,000 of that, on our parks and open spaces. For example, the fantastic project we're doing at Buttermere Park at the moment. We've paid over £1.3 million over to the County Council for highways improvements or for educational funding. And we've paid £767,000 to the NHS for things like public health, that sort of work. And one thing, Mr. Mayor, I am particularly pleased about is that under this administration and the work that's being done under the new borough plan, when Section 106 agreements are drawn up, the monies, we believe, should always be spent in the locality of the development, rather than being transferred to other sections of the borough. This is completely appropriate because we believe that the money should be spent in those areas which are affected by the development. Development can be positive, but the development itself can have negative effects, and it's only right that the people who suffer those get the monies as a byproduct of that. So we will not see a repeat of the situation under the previous administration and what was referred, I believe, Mr. Mayor, to Labour's third-rate borough plan, where money was earmarked, for example, to be transferred from any future developments in the Arbury ward over to pay for the new Bedworth Leisure Centre. So the people of Arbury will not see improvements in their neighbourhood should that eventuate. So that's a very high-level answer, but I'm afraid it's a very high-level question. I've done the best I can with it.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. You made it as long as it's relevant to the question you first asked.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Croft. May I please ask for a specific example within Galley Common, given the developments up Campo have now finished most of their stages, if not in their entirety? Is there any examples you could name in Galley Common at all?
Thank you, Mr. Ratcliffe. Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. He talks about Camp Hill and Galley Common. There's an awful lot that's been spent in Galley Common, and I have some figures here. We've spent £67,000 on parks and play and open space area in the Galley Common ward, and £74,000 on broader sort of path and park improvements. You'll find that some of the money, for example, through the county council is paid to keeping one of the bus services. I can remember it's the 18 or 19 that goes to the village, but without that you'd have an hourly bus service rather than a half-hourly bus service. And Mr. Mayor, I do just want to give a bit of background, since it's been raised in Galley Common, that over the past 6-7 years there have been approximately 1,000 extra houses going on that route between Ansley Island and the old Chase pub in Galley Common. That is a very good example of what happens when you leave the Labour Party in charge of planning in this borough. Because what you will see on the agenda later tonight, we are very near the closing stages of a new borough plan. It will be a first-in-class borough plan with appropriate infrastructure, proper consultation of the residents, and proper planning to get the right houses in the right places. And what Galley Common has, unfortunately, because it was approved 2017, 2016, is a very good example of planning without appropriate infrastructure being put in at the time of development under the Labour Party, and without appropriate challenge made to inappropriate and badly designed estates. At this very moment, again, Councillor Smith, who is the planning guru, will be able to tell you, we are paying for and we are taking several inappropriate and poorly designed from a highways and from a localities perspective developments through the planning inspectorate to defend ourselves against appeals against our refusing those planning applications. Now, the previous administration did not do that. No. So the people of Galley Common have had to suffer the effects of inappropriate and overdevelopment. So if the Labour Party and if Labour Party candidates wish to go around Galley Common talking about development and the Labour Party's record on development, then they can be my guest.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. We move forward to item number 7, questions by members. Councillor Baxter Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Wilson, many residents remember the legacy of failure that we inherited when we took control of this council in 2021. They lived for 45 years. Could the leader of the council please give us a rundown of what the Conservatives have achieved for the people of Nuneaton and Bedworth over the past 3 years?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilson.
I thank Councillor Baxter Payne for his question, as it gives me the opportunity to remind residents what is at stake at the election on the 2nd of May. In 2021, we inherited a council that was a financial basket case, top-heavy with senior managers, lacking clear direction and business sense, and it was the residents of this borough who suffered for Labour's clear ineptitude. So, Mr Mayor, what have we achieved? We said we would kickstart the regeneration of Nuneaton Town Centre, and what have we done? We have a hotel almost built to completion that we already have local businesses wanting to use for their travelling visitors and support regional events. And as I outlined earlier in announcements, we have secured the funding to proceed with the cinema, food hall, college campus, India Red and Bridge to Living. Promise made, promise kept. We said we would support our markets. We have frozen the market rents in Nuneaton, introduced an outdoor market in Bedworth, and Bedworth Indoor Market is getting £700,000 worth of investment. Promise made, promise kept. We said we would cut car parking charges. Under Labour, it costs £2.80 to park for 3 hours. Under the Conservatives, it is £1.50 for 3 hours. Promise made, promise kept. We said we would review Labour's unfair borough plan. We began an immediate review, halved the housing, refused over 1,800 unneeded houses that we are now defending at appeal, and submitted our revised plan, all within 3 years. Promise made, promise kept. We said we would spend Section 106 money in the areas that have taken development. Buttermere Park is well underway to completion, being the first fully accessible park in the borough, and use Section 106 money to fund new play equipment in Exhall, Bulkington, Stockingford Rec and Montana Walk. Promise made, promise kept. We said we would stand up against illegal gypsy and traveller encampments. We have defended our injunction all the way through the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court, and we have a policy in place that cuts the need for traveller pitches, which defends against illegal and unwanted encampments in our borough for the first time ever. Promise made, promise kept. We said we would invest in local play areas so that local residents have good quality facilities for local families. We have completely replaced Buttermere Park. Sherborne Park is half complete. New equipment in Riversley Park and the Miners Park, Montana Walk Park, Stockingford Rec, Borkington Rec, Exhall, and new replacement parks planned for Attleborough Rec, Sorrel Road Rec and Marlborough Road Rec. This is the single biggest programme of works in our parks in the past 30 years. Promise made, promise kept. We said we would cut waste, focus on delivery of services and get value for money. We have cut the Mayor's car and chauffeur, sold Labour's climbing tower, cut the number of managers at the Town Hall, brought in mixed recycling and responded to Coventry Labour's bin strike, which saw little impact on local services. Promise made and promise kept again, Mr Mayor. I could go on, but I think everyone gets the picture. It is only with the Conservatives at the helm of Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council that we are turning this ship around and putting it on a course for success. If we put Labour back at the wheel of the ship, they will soon sink it. Nuneaton and Bedworth cannot afford to go back to Labour. Mr Mayor, if residents want to continue with a Conservative council that will back the law-abiding, hard-working citizen, they need to vote Conservative on the 2nd of May.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could the leader bring us up to date with the 700,000 for the refurbishment of the Bedworth indoor market?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Singh, for your question. Bedworth Indoor Market has been allocated £716,000 for renovation and upgrade works from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. The fund totals £4 million, but the allocation of £716,000 is the single largest project that we are undertaking as part of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. We have recently conducted a pre-market engagement exercise that will help guide the full tender process, which we expect to launch in the late spring. We said we would support Bedworth Market. Promise made, promise kept, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Rob Tromans, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. 10 years ago, as a newly elected councillor, the first question I asked in this chamber related to the possibility of bringing forward a business improvement district, a BID. Whilst the controlling Labour group at the time showed little interest in supporting town centre businesses with such an initiative, I was pleased that following the Conservative group taking control, the opportunity has now been progressed. Can the leader please update the council on the latest developments to bring forward the BID for Nuneaton Town Centre?
Thank you, Councillor Troman. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I can't tell you how pleased I am that we are finally progressing a business improvement district for Nuneaton. It is something Councillor Tromans and I long called for in opposition and pledged to support when we took control of the council in 2021. I can confirm that there was a formal postal ballot of all town centre businesses within the defined area in February-March of this year. The results were overwhelmingly in favour of the bid. 86% of those voting and 89% by rateable value. I myself exercised the council's votes over the properties we own within the area to support the bid. The bid has been led by local Nuneaton businesses and business owners, and I commend their hard work and efforts to get it this far. They will charge an additional levy on the business rates to support additional projects within the Nuneaton Town Centre that I hope will be attractive and draw even more people to our wonderful town. There are approximately 350 local businesses involved in the bid, and it will unlock up to £1 million of additional investment in Nuneaton Town Centre over the next 5 years, and will place local businesses in direct control of the bid and an active partner with us as the local council. I, for one, and I'm sure I can say all members on this side of the chamber, am excited at the potential this brings for Nuneaton Town Centre. We pledge to support a business improvement district for Nuneaton. Again, promise made and promise kept.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to ask my fellow ward councillor, Councillor Claire Golby, what she feels are the greatest successes that the Housing and Communities team have achieved during her time as portfolio holder?
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Golby.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Councillor Green, because it's often forgot that we're not just ward councillors in the Cabinet. We are actually running a multi-million-pound organisation in what is effectively, as has been highlighted, our spare time. And we're doing quite a good job of it. So I would like to move on to some of the things that we've done under my leadership under the for housing and communities. And I'd be happy to highlight some of the most significant successes that we've had. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list, but it is a long one, so bear with. So firstly, I need to extend my appreciation as well to the teams, because without the really hard work that the teams have put in and the gusto that they've gone to with sorting out the changes and dealing with everything that's come down the line with legislation and everything else, this wouldn't have happened. The team is fantastic, and also the partners that we work with as well. Without them, this wouldn't have been a possibility. So we started in 2021 with our strategic restructuring of the council, and my team were no exception, by transitioning towards specialised roles, including antisocial behaviour officers and tenancy management officers. We have significantly enhanced our capacity to address complex issues and improve the welfare of our residents, with much better outcomes for both the residents and council. But it's not just about restructuring, it's about implementing policies that serve the needs of our communities and protect this council. And I've said before, I was absolutely gobsmacked at the lack of some of the policies that we didn't have, because policies do protect this council as well as our residents. So we've introduced policies such as the new downsizing policies, the new decamp policies to move people out of their properties should they need to. We've introduced policies for support for vulnerable persons and victims of domestic abuse. And this reflects the Conservative leadership's dedication to creating a safe and inclusive environment for everybody. Since day one, I was adamant, and again, I've never made any not been shy about saying this, I was adamant we should be relentless in our efforts to combat antisocial behaviour. In our borough, I think it's an absolute scourge, and it really affects people in their own homes. So through targeted enforcement measures and proactive community engagement initiatives, we've made massive improvements in the last 3 years. Absolutely massive. Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council are now the 5th highest ranking council for ASB-related evictions in our housing stock in the UK. And also the 5th highest based on the number of evictions compared to the number of incidents. When we consider ourselves against some of the really big hitters like Birmingham, that isn't bad for a little council like ours. So it proves that we're actually doing the right thing. And I know it's been said before, but we don't evict vulnerable people. They get all the assistance that they require. In 2023 alone, the team have opened and closed or investigated 438 cases of ASB reported and closed 353. The team have also had a tenant convicted for breach of a civil injunction, which resulted in a 3-month prison sentence. So again, they're taking things very seriously, and they are taking things much further than they were ever allowed to do before under the previous administration. In addition to the management of ASB cases, we've been taking enforcement action. The team have also been busy target hard in areas where antisocial behaviour was prolific and persistent, which again wasn't done under the previous Labour leadership at the Town Hall. So not only did we bring back CCTV, 24/7 CCTV in our town centres, something that was removed by Labour when they were last in control at the Town Hall, but we've installed CCTV in multiple locations within our housing stock. So, for example, Buckingham Court, Stoneleigh Court, Lexington Court, something else that wasn't done under Labour. We've installed new security gates in and around some of the areas that we've got high ASB, antisocial behaviour issues with. So residents are now more secure, again, something that wasn't done under Labour. And we've introduced regular tenant engagement forums for residents to speak directly to us about their issues, and which we can then take action on. Because if we know it's happening, we aren't going to let it rest. So we've embraced new technology. We've introduced the Noise app, which offers a simple user experience for people reporting noise issues. It's a more streamlined investigation tool for our officers, saves time, saves issues for the residents. And since 2023-2024, when we introduced the app, we've seen over 660 reports of noise associated to antisocial behaviour and 600 reports of other types of noise, which were reported to us as separate incidents. We've worked closely with the states and the environmental enforcement officers to tackle fly tipping, and we do have some persistent areas of fly tipping that are unfortunately the residents are fly tipping in their own areas, which is slightly ridiculous, but we will get to the bottom of that, and they do risk their tenancies. So again, you will be taking down the appropriate channels. Under my tenure, we've introduced block inspections to enhance tenant engagement, and we've reintroduced the estate walkabouts. We've introduced inspections across all our council's mobile home sites, and there's also been an upskilling of the team to be able to take cases to court themselves, so we're not relying on external counsel as much, saving money for the council, and also providing a skills service for the team. Come on, Jeff, turn your phone off. It is. That's the tenor to the Mayor's charity there, Jeff. So as far as wider tenant engagement goes, we've got Stan the Van, which is a mobile tenancy engagement unit. It's just being liveried up at the moment. And Stan the Van will be ready to roll quite soon. And you can't miss him because he's bright blue. So we're going to be rolling out. So instead of relying on residents coming to us, we're actively going out to our tenants. That wasn't something that was done wholesale before. We've done the new Council's in-house magazine, which goes out to our tenants again. There's been 3 publications of that. In private sector housing, we've distributed over £1.5 million worth of energy efficiency grants since February in 2021. And that to date has improved 159 Nuneaton and Bedworth properties. So we've had a great success as well with our Rough Sleeper initiative. Again, something that's really important to me is tackling homelessness. So thanks to government funding, we secured £800,000 for 3 years, allowing us to provide 24/7 supported accommodation for rough sleepers. Year 2 saw the introduction of the Housing First model, resulting in successful housing placements and ongoing support, plus our Rough Sleeping Partners meeting is back on. Again, something that was done under me, and we offer wraparound support for those at risk. We also take a preventative approach on homelessness because prevention is obviously better than cure. And we've introduced a new homelessness prevention service where early intervention has helped a significant number of residents, and we've actually prevented people coming into our system having to go through the homelessness process. We stopped that before it even started. Again, it's all a benefit to the resident and to the taxpayer because it costs us money having to go through the system. We've opened the new homeless hostel, which is named St Benedict's House, or some people know it as Church Road, but it is St Ben's. And we've done that with the view of putting pets in there as well, because we have to pay to board people's pets. Again, simple change. We've got something now where it saves a cost to the taxpayer if we've got families and households, because we do have families and households where they need support. They can bring their pets too, because for some people, their pets are an absolute lifeline. We shouldn't ever forget that. So that saves money on boarding costs. We've commenced refurbishment of the refurbishment of the existing homeless hostel, the Gables. We've had a conversion of the General Fund offices in Bedworth to create 3 self-contained flats for use as temporary accommodation. The choice-based letting service is absolutely booming, with 364 void properties and 209 registered provider void property allocations from April 2023 to March 2024. And under my leadership, we've had the lowest number of voids, which is basically council properties that are stood empty. We've had the lowest number of voids ever in council history. With the recent launch of our downsizing policy and our fixed-term tenancies policies, which I just have no idea why these weren't addressed sooner, we're ensuring that there's the best use of our housing stock. We do need throughput in our housing stock to keep people, for the stock to be available. We do have, in some instances, people who have had family homes who are now single people living in 3-bed houses. That's not right. that's not right for the people we've got who are in temporary accommodation that need family properties. So there's a whole piece of work going on there. The HEART team, which deals with the adaptations to allow people to stay in their homes for longer with additional needs and disabilities. We manage this for the whole of Warwickshire. We've implemented a new IT system in 2023-2024 to manage HEART. We've got 2,641 social care equipment pieces provided since 2021, and £11.6 million worth of grants have been completed, servicing 11,000 new cases that have been registered since 2021. So there's a whole lot of work going on there. So my communities team, who are probably the most visible to the general public, with no project more visible than when we had the Knife Angel in town. And I've already spoken a lot of times about the Knife Angel, but it was an absolute fantastic success. And the best example of collaborative working that this council has ever done, I believe. We reached over 1,400 secondary school pupils, 1,600 primary school pupils, and we educate them at the dangers of knife crime and violence. My team directly had 2,500 people visit their community's market stall. They distributed 985 community safety packs. We bought 10 bleed kits and we upgraded the defibrillator throughout the borough with those bleed kits. And aside for this, we've increased the number of our Nomad cameras from 17 to 24, and all are now equipped with the latest multi-lens technology. So I admit, ISB remains a challenge. We all know that. I'm not daft. But these expansions serve as a powerful deterrent to support the communities. We're building stronger partnerships with pilot projects, partnering with Refuge, the domestic abuse charity, to enhance our support for victims of domestic abuse by seamlessly integrating Refuge officers with our MBBC officers. So they are on site. That means it's a streamlined service for victims. It's ensuring efficiency and a laser focus on what they actually need, because domestic abuse, again, is an absolute scourge on our communities. I've nearly finished. We're also investing in community safety, thanks to UK SPF money from government. Over £60,000 has been injected into various community safety projects. We've empowered local youth groups with additional activities to target interventions in schools. We're tackling crimes and ASB head-on. Within our Nuneaton and Bedworth Community Safety Partnership partners, my leadership is driving efficiency and impact, ensuring maximum utilisation of funding from the Home Office and the PCC's office. We've also continued our support for the Armed Forces Covenant, and our commitment to the Armed Forces is unwavering. I'm immensely proud of the progress we've made in such a short time. And I can't, again, under any circumstances, I can't detract from the work that the teams have done, because they've been fantastic. So under my leadership, our achievements stand as a testament to the power of collaboration, innovation, and above all, our unwavering commitment to service the needs of our communities, which often goes unseen by the wider borough. A shining example of this is Cleaver Gardens. We've actually sorted out Cleaver Gardens. The agreement has been signed with the County Council, and we are now in procurement to get the job done. That's years of outstanding work. So finally, I want to thank everybody, all the staff, all our partners, everybody that's been involved in the hard work that we've done. We really do appreciate it on this side of the chamber. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Colby. Moving forward, Councillor Condacor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the new estates in Wellington, we have many new ponds, which are part of the sustainable drainage systems. They should hold water during periods of rainfall and then release the water slowly over the next hours or even days into watercourses. At the moment, all these ponds have some form of barrier, such as fence, knee rails or hedging, to discourage people getting too close to the water and help them become wildlife havens areas. Controversially, the council has asked the developer to remove all the fencing around the large pond on the Davidson's Church Field development, as the open space is near adoption. This pond has become a valuable wildlife habitat and sometimes hosts a kingfisher in winter. I totally understand why the council doesn't want the long-term cost of repeatedly replacing large lengths of softwood fencing, but I understand why some residents are unhappy at having no barrier so close to the play equipment used by the children across a wide range of ages. Can the Cabinet member allow officers to look at some compromise of using a mixture of a knee rail some new hedging around this very significant pond as is used by the other sites in Wellington. Given it is possible the hedging would actually count toward biodiversity offsetting, and I'm sure myself and the other local councillors and volunteers would plant the hedging. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Condricourt. Given the number of questions we still have to go, I will allow the members' questions to continue. Thank you. Councillor Gutteridge, you want to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Condricourt, for the question. The adoption of public open space on the 3 developments at the top of Weddington Road are progressing, but are at different stages. The furthest along is the Davidson Church Field site. The fencing was removed around the SUD's Sustainable Urban Drainage System feature, as it was not on the approved plans. Not on the approved plans. And contrary to the Council's adopted water safety policy. The Council is currently preparing for the adoption of this site, which should be completed later this year. Parks have to sign it off, then it goes to legal. And it should be noted that the balancing feature is no closer to the play facilities as they are to the river anchor itself, and that our water safety policy will be applied in determining the future management arrangements for the whole site.
Thank you, Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Condricourt, you have a supplementary?
Yeah, very briefly, I wasn't making the point that it was required by our water safety policy. I was asking, could we have a compromise and look at planting, hedging and a knee rail? So can I ask, can we consider having an additional feature of the knee rail and some hedging, because it would make residents feel safer if there was a bit of a barrier between the play area and the very deep, very large pond. And one of the things the pond is different for is it will freeze in winter, unlike the river anchor, which is a very different environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would you like to respond, Councillor Gutteridge?
Thank you. I'll say it again. We have a water safety policy, and we will adhere to the water safety policy. If you would like to ride up to Thornhill, you can see the Thornhill Park and see the pond that we have with the various wildlife, mallard ducks, wood pigeons, magpies, moorhens nesting at the moment, and see that for your own thing. But we must adhere to the water safety policy when we adopt it.
Thank you, Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regard to the former Woolworths site, could the council leader explain the lack of due diligence in the leasing arrangements and update the council as to any further developments in this situation? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Wilson.
Mr. Mayor, I do get rather concerned and disappointed that the Green Party opposite constantly talks down our town centres and the work we are doing to transform and breathe new life into Nuneaton. It is absolutely wrong to say that there was a lack of due diligence with regards to the old Woolworths site. Is Councillor Wright now going to claim that he has the gift of foresight and knowing what the future holds? No one at the time the lease was signed knew that Wilko's was going to collapse and go into administration. No one. We signed the lease in good faith, working to regenerate the Church Street, Bridge Street end of town and keep a much-loved Wilko's store in Nuneaton. Woolworths offered, and does still offer, a great site to relocate to, and it is only down to the actions of the national retailer that we are in this position, not on our part. Unfortunately, as the lease was signed prior to the collapse of Wilko's, we are bound into a legally binding agreement. This remains with the administrator, and we are trying to find a way forward, which may include serving notice to discontinue the lease. But to date, the administrator has given us no indication of their future plans. We have had interest in the site, which is extremely encouraging, and I hope that we are able to resolve this soon. But the only lack of due diligence has been the drafting of this question, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Question 7, Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does the portfolio holder agree with me that this Conservative administration has now met its manifesto commitments to safeguard the Bedworth woodlands against inappropriate development?
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Smith, you wish to respond?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I thank Councillor Evans for his question and would absolutely agree that this Conservative administration has fully honoured its manifesto commitments to safeguard the Bedworth woodlands from inappropriate development. The woodlands story started back in 2014 when the then Labour administration made a similar manifesto promise to the residents of Bedworth, declaring that whilst they were in control, the woodlands would be in safe hands, protected from development and would never be built on. Wind forward to 2019, and the controlling Labour administration, having agreed to take 4,000 overflow houses from their friends in Coventry, broke their manifesto promise and allocated the woodland site for over 800 houses in their disastrous borough plan. When they adopted their third-rate plan, the Labour administration made another promise that due to the now out-of-date data the plan was based on, and having taken 10 years to produce the plan, they would start an immediate review of that plan, as recommended by the Inspector at the public examination hearings, and this was another promise broken. By 2021, residents, having tired of the failing Labour administration and with no borough plan review in sight, elected the current Conservative group to take over the running of the council on a manifesto promise that we would kickstart an immediate review of the borough plan and remove the woodlands and an allocation of nearly 200 dwellings off Lansing Road in Bulkington as strategic development sites. Within just 3 months of taking control, it was the Conservatives that kept their manifesto promise by holding an issues and options public consultation to lay the ground for the borough plan review. And from that point, the Bedworth woodlands and the Lansing Road in Bulkington sites were no longer destined to be allocated as strategic sites in the emerging plan. After just 3 years, not 10, that review is now nearing completion, having been submitted to the Secretary of State and Inspectorate for examination in public, with hearings due to be held as early as July. The review process has been a mammoth task, and I must take this opportunity to publicly thank our excellent planning policy team, who really have gone above and beyond to deliver a first-class plan in record time, having been faced with overhauling 15 major policy documents that the Labour group had failed to keep up to date. Finally, to underpin the seriousness with which this Conservative administration takes its duty to upholding its manifesto promises, I'm delighted to let Council know that just last night a planning application was before the Planning Committee with a proposal to build 150 houses on the woodland site, and I'm happy to say it was unanimously rejected by the committee. So in answer to your question, Councillor Evans, unlike Labour, this Conservative administration takes its manifesto promises seriously and has absolutely kept its manifesto promise to protect the Bedworth woodlands from development.
Thank you. Councillor Smith. Councillor Hammersley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I ask the leader about the £20 million from the government, which is much needed for the regeneration of Bedworth, for an update on the progress with the procedures so that this can go ahead at the earliest date possible with the minimum delay? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hammersley. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It is indeed excellent news that on top of the £16 million we secured from the Levelling Up Fund for Bedworth for the new leisure centre, as well as the £14 million investment by the council and developers, and the £716,000 from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund for the refurbishment of the Bedworth indoor market, that we now have £20 million to establish a town deal for Bedworth. We are in the process of setting up a new town deal board for Bedworth and seeking a chair of the board. We have received start-up funding of £250,000 to begin the work of putting together the board and help facilitate the work that will need to be done to put together the plan of what we want to spend the funding on. Additional officer capacity will be brought in to enable this work. As part of this process, we will work together with local businesses, education, health and charity sectors to establish the town deal board and plan so we can carry on the legacy of levelling up Bedworth that this Conservative administration began in 2021. We pledge to support levelling up and investment in Bedworth. Promise made, promise kept, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. That concludes the questions from members. We move forward to item number 8, matters of special urgency. We have 2 matters of special decisions that were made. You will find them on page 4 initially of the main agenda, and then on the addendum, item 8 addendum on that item. They are purely for noting purposes. Sorry, Councillor Condacor.
Mr Mayor, in noting both those special urgency things, the first one, the housing complaints policy, was clearly a predictable thing brought in by government law. So I am confused about why it's special urgency and why we didn't know it was coming. Government haven't just sprung this on us. We knew we were going to have a requirement for housing providers to have a complaints policy. So can someone actually explain in the debate or in noting this why we didn't see this one coming? Thank you.
Can you answer that one, Brent, please?
I'm going to attempt to, Mr Mayor. It's simply the volume of work that was required to complete that and the timeliness of the actual information coming through from the regulator of social housing to determine exactly what the process for complaints needed to be meant that it needed to be, I need to take an urgent decision to put it in place. So whilst it's quite right, we were told that that new system would come into being, the actual detail of what was required was not as timely as it might have been.
Thank you, Brent. Councillor Cott, is there, again, supplementary?
Point on that, surely things go in the forward plan when you know about it. So I agree that you didn't get the report finished in time, but it's still strange that these things become special urgency when, as soon as the government says they're having a new policy, surely it should go on our forward plan. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
If you would, please, Brent.
Just to clarify, you need to know what you have to do to be able to do it. And if you're not told what you have to do in a timely fashion, you're playing catch-up to do that. And that was what the issue was.
Thank you for that, Brent. Moving forward, item number 9, report from Cabinet. Again, on the addendum 2, page 2, we have the report from the Cabinet. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As ever, I am happy to present the report to Cabinet and from Cabinet to full Council, and just give some potted highlights of the last couple of meetings. So, I'm really pleased actually that we managed to be able to progress the Bedworth Physical Activity Hub. I know it keeps getting called the Physical Activity Hub. I still think of it as a leisure centre, but we are actually moving forward with that. The preparatory works are starting, and this helped us take it that next step further, and it will be moving forward quite swiftly over the coming months. So residents in Bedworth will actually be able to see levelling up in action and what a Conservative administration does for it in action. We have also had the street renaming, which has enabled us to go ahead, and I'm sure Councillor Kovetkovic will be extremely happy with this, about honouring Louis Carter, who was one of our fallen heroes from Nuneaton, just as we did with Sergeant Simon Valentine, and in likewise fashion we are doing the same for him. And then we have the fact that we're doing the Creative Explorers update, that we are actually doing direct targeted intervention with the communities who are most disadvantaged with art and leisure, and that is progressing. And of course we have the Borough Plan Review, which we'll be considering later, and the Bedworth Town Deal Board, where we had to take that as an urgent decision because it wasn't expected. We couldn't put it on the forward plan. It was an announcement in the Chancellor's budget. And in order to ensure that we could receive the DOSH as quickly as possible and get on with it, we took it as an urgent item so that we could actually begin the work which we needed to do. Whilst it is a smaller item, but I think it is still significant, we had the suicide prevention update, which to me is particularly important because we know that in this part of the county there is a higher prevalence of suicide, particularly in young males. Every suicide is a suicide too many, and whatever we can do to try and prevent that in our communities, I think is worthwhile and sterling work that this council does. Unfortunately, as I said at Cabinet, and it is true, one of the most saddening aspects of the role of leader of the council is being rung up by one of the officers to be informed that someone has taken their life on council property. And no one wants to pick up that phone call, and unfortunately I've had to do that on far too many occasions. I hope that the measures we're putting in place will at least enable our officers to spot the signs, to give the support that is needed and coordinate with the agencies that are necessary to try and help someone. If we can help one person through this, then that is our job done, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Do we have any questions from the members specific to the Cabinet report? Thank you, Councillor Condegor.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'd like to start with the Bedworth Physical Activity Centre, because obviously people have seen in Bedworth what they call was someone spectating for oil in the park, which is obviously them starting to actually look to see how solid the ground is. Can we actually have an update from Councillor Markham about the risks to the project, particularly now we've lost the Bedworth Woodlands funding for it? You've obviously another £346,000 short on your budget, because that's Section 106 money. If the planning permission for Bedworth Woodlands doesn't go ahead, is lost as well. And obviously we don't know the exact cost until we know what the contractors are building on. So can we have an update about the cost risks and the impact of, quite rightly, turning down things like Bedworth Woodlands? Thank you.
Councillor Condacor. Councillor Markham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Keith, for your question. At the moment, first of all, the 106 money from the Woodlands, we didn't actually calculate that in the costings because we weren't sure whether it was going ahead or not, so there is no risk where that money is concerned. And as far as everything else goes, it is actually on track with the costings that we have already laid out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Markham. Councillor Condacor.
My second question is for Councillor Croft. We've got on page 3 the general fund monitoring. Currently we have no accounts to see for the previous year, 2022-23, and we've got all sorts of issues in the current stuff about things not being actually in the invoices they measured. If we look both on this and the housing revenue account monitoring, there are measures in our scrutiny reports which are totally bizarre. The housing one tomorrow, we have a £4 million of cash sitting in the housing thing because all the interest debt hasn't actually yet been calculated in all the figures. So can I have Councillor Croft's update on catching up on all the delayed accounts and budget monitoring so that scrutiny committees can have a decent set of accounts when they're actually monitoring progress?
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. And I believe Councillor Condacor has already been told this, but in terms of our outstanding audit queries, that is an issue with our audit partner, who we are now leaving, or who are leaving us, because we've got a new audit partner under the procurement framework. They have essentially had other commitments other than us. They were more committed to other partners, which meant there have been undue delays in our audit process for 2022-23 and 2021-22, which we envisage 21-22 being completed in the very near future. 2022-2023 is more of an open question that we're going to have to pick up with a new partner when they come in. As Councillor Condacor might intuit from the tone of my answer, I'm not very pleased with that partner, and we will be negotiating the fee that they were going to charge for us, because it is not good enough that we've not had the work that we commissioned them to do. Councillor Evans has just sort of said to me, and it is a very good point that I need to issue, which is that unfortunately we are not the only council in this position. There is a huge backlog of audit queries across local government in this country, and the government has put in a deadline of this autumn, at which point everything will cut off and we will have to deal with the position as we find it. The thing I would point out is that now that we have reset our budgeting and reporting, we will be able to produce sets of accounts that are considerably simpler and considerably easier for members of the public and councillors even to understand, because we've abolished our old ridiculous system of recharges where bits of departments were cross-charged to all sorts of the organisation, so nobody knew what the costs actually meant. They'll be much more transparent, and they will be much more they will be much more easy to understand. As for the numbers reported to the OSPs, this is a known issue in the finance team, and we're picking it up with the personnel department.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Councillor Condacor, do we have another question, a different item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On page, I think it's 4, we have a bit about market update, exempt key decision. Obviously, the market traders have been briefed on the potential changes to the market. It's been reported in the press it's £85,000 cut to the market budget. Can Councillor Wilson actually explain to the council why you're breaking your promises not to support the market with this massive cut, and how much of a detriment do you think the new arrangement will have on the number of stalls? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor.
I was hoping Councillor Condacor would go for this, because yet again it just shows the bold-faced ineptitude of the man, that he is spreading lies and rumours that actually upset the very livelihoods of people who rely on the markets. And I can categorically say that this is not a cut to the markets. In fact, this administration has been the most market-friendly administration in the history of Nuneaton and Bedworth. I defy anyone to challenge our record on the markets and town centres, Mr. Mayor. So what we have actually done is highlight the fact that because of the rising costs that we're all facing, minimum wage going up, inflation which is causing the costs of everything to go up, we are now facing an £85,000 loss in the budget. It is costing us £85,000 to run the markets. It isn't about a cut. What we have been talking to the market traders about is a different way of actually providing the market itself. And I can tell you that every single trader around that room, when I discussed it with them, was fully on board with what we were discussing. Councillor Clark was with me as the chair of the relevant OSP to have that meeting. What this is about is working together in partnership with the market traders so that we can reduce our overheads and theirs. Because we know that our market rates are high compared to other places. We've tried to reduce them, but our budget doesn't allow us to do that. But if we can find a way to reduce our overheads by, for example, the traders self-erecting their stalls rather than us putting them up for them, if they are able to do that, then we can put in a discount, which means they save money on their market rates, and we save money by not having the wear and tear on our stalls, and we save money by not having to put the people into to put the stalls up in the first place. And where there is an issue where a trader can't actually do that, because of their age or an infirmity or a health issue, something like that, then they can actually purchase that service office to erect the stall. But it will still be at a lesser rate than that which we are looking at charging at the moment. So the figures are still to be worked out, but this is in no way, absolutely no way, a closure of the market. This market has been going, as Councillor Clark proudly tells me as a former market trader, the charter is over 800 years old, coming up to this very year. I want to be the leader that ensures it carries on for the next 800 years. It's only the parties opposite that will shut it, not this administration.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Condacor, a different question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We had the suicide prevention policy come to us at Cabinet the other week, I think it was last week, And it's really important work, so it's very sad that it's got such a single mention here. But does Councillor Markham have any data on how many people who commit suicide that are tenants? And in terms of the poor access to the council house, with the council house being locked so much of the time, are we going to take any steps to try and enable more people who are struggling to actually talk to a human face to face?
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Councillor Gutteridge wishes to answer.
Thank you for that emotive question. I think we've all been touched by suicide with members, either family or close friends. So as it is a very sensitive matter, I will send you a written answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gutteridge. Given I see no other questions regarding... Oh, sorry. Councillor Lubs.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Wilson for his comments earlier on, which I very much welcome, regarding Fusilier Louis Carter. It's been a long time in coming, many years in fact, and I'm delighted that it's this administration that will be delivering that memorial, that very fitting memorial, by renaming a road after Fusilier Carter. I know the Carter family, this is something they've wanted for a very long time. The Royal Regiment, the Fusiliers, have a proud link to this borough. They do actually have the freedom of this borough. And there is a very large Fusilier community within this borough as well. So I know that it will also mean an awful lot to them. So I thank Councillor Wilson for what this administration has done towards achieving that, because that goes to the heart of the matter of everything that we do. It is our community, and it's wonderful to see this administration putting this community first at every single opportunity. I would, however, like to ask Councillor Wilson, will we be able to get this done for Normandy Day, which is at early June?
Thank you, Councillor Jetovich. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the question. I can't give a cast iron guarantee because there are procedures that have to be followed, which have been rather more complicated with the Levelling Up Act. But we are, the aim is to have it done for Normandy Day, but it is absolutely signed and sealed and delivered that it will happen. It's just when we can actually do the formal unveiling. I would like it to happen for Normandy Day, as it would be a nice tie-in, obviously. But sometimes circumstances, events, dear boy, events, as the old saying goes, it's not always possible. But where we can, that is the aim, and officers are aware of that.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Moving forward, item number 10, timetable for the forthcoming meetings for the next municipal year. Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I will be very brief on this. This should be a nice quick item. I'm just presenting the draft timetable, which will be formally approved at the annual council. We'll take any feedback under advisement. Members should note that we have in the budget looked to make some alterations to the committees, and they are still in the timetable, but that is of course pending the work of our friends at the Constitutional Review Working Party and the Audit and Standards Committee to make those changes which we envisage in year. And while I'm on my feet, and it is the last council of the session, I will just put on record my thanks to all the committee clerks and the Democratic Services officers because they have done some wonderful work this year and they do support us very well. So thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Do I have a seconder for that motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I second that and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. I shall offer it open to any person who wishes to ask a question. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I just ask about the meeting date that's in for the 22nd of January, Extraordinary Council Civic? It just seems... I'm just wondering...
Does that satisfy your question? Okay, fair enough. That's fair enough.
There is an answer.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Condacor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm less interested than normal because obviously I won't be a councillor after the 3rd of May. But a couple of questions. It's always strange that we have committees that never meet, like the Appeals Committee. So I hope we're actually decommissioning that committee and merging its work into like the Employment Committee or something. And the other question is, we seem to just have a single borough plan meeting on the 10th of December. Is that planned when we'll get the borough plan, or why aren't we having a meeting some point this summer to discuss the borough plan as it goes towards the hearing? Because as we see in later paperwork, we're going to have to give various decisions delegated authority to our officers, and it would have been useful if the Borough Plan Committee would have met around that time to actually maybe second check or have some input on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condicott. Councillor Smith, would you like to respond to that question first?
Yeah, I can quickly respond. The situation is fluid at the moment. We'll come to the borough plan in a later item, but we're currently waiting for the inspectorate to actually fix a date for the hearings, the examination. So there will be other borough plan committee meetings, but we can't actually fix the date until we've got some firm commitment from the inspectorate.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't intending to speak on this item, but I just want to make this brief comment about the point that's been made about the Appeals Committee. Surely it's actually a good thing if there's no business coming forward to the Appeals Committee. That committee deals with complaints from members of staff about their employment conditions, etc. So if there's no complaints from staff, surely that means that this council is a good employer, and therefore that should be considered as a good thing.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Point taken. Quite correctly. Do we have any other questions relating to the meetings? In which case, do you wish to respond, Councillor Wilson?
It's only a brief response, seeing as I'm the chair of the Civic Honours Subcommittee. It's just to put a placeholder in the calendar if we were to need a special honours council, if we were to bestow an aldermanship or a freedom of the borough on an individual or anyone else. It's because in the past few occasions we've done it, it's been difficult coordinating calendars, whereas if we have something pre-planned in the diary, we can then work backwards if there is the desire to bestow those honours. If not, then the meeting will not go ahead. It's just there as a placeholder at the moment. I'm sure the Chief Executive's successor will be more than happy to cancel it if the need does not arise.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. In which case, I shall move that to the vote. All those accept the up and coming timetable as is. All in favour? Anybody against? And do we have any abstentions? That is carried as is. Thank you. Item 11. We move forward to the report from the various OSP committee chairs. I ask Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, as I say, I asked to propose the annual overview and scrutiny panel meeting reports for all three of the panels. But firstly, can I just, similar to my colleagues, thank the officers for the preparation and presentation of the reports to the various committees during the last year, which have been absolutely excellent, and I thank them for their time and diligence in providing those. In addition, I'd also like to thank the Vice Chair and the members of my committee on the Business and Regeneration Committee for the efforts they've undertaken over the last 12 months relating to the scrutiny of the various detailed items on the agenda we have before us tonight. In addition to that, there were two items that have already been referred to in part tonight, where there were urgent decisions that needed to be sent to Cabinet, and I took the decision after speaking with officers that they should go through. Those two items related to the operation of the market stalls and the bid, and the other one was the Nuneaton bid proposals. So I thought they should go sooner rather than later, and that was a decision that I took as chair of the committee. I did, before making the decision and agreeing for them to go to Cabinet, discuss with officers any repercussions or issues that may arise, and was content with the responses I got. I would therefore, Mr Mayor, like to move this item on all three reports, but I do note that other chairs were holding meetings also, and I would ask if any of those would like to add anything similar to my addition that I had to make to the Business and Regeneration report. So I'd move that, Mr Mayor. Finally, if I may, is to thank you, because we had a conflict at my last, in February, and you kindly stood in as the chair for the meeting, so thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'll move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. No problem at all for that. Do I have a seconder for this? Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I would like to second the motion to accept all three OSP reports. Whilst in reserving my right to speak, along with Councillor Clark's comments, I would like to pay a particular tribute to members from all parties, to the officers that have supported the OSP that I chair, and to the members of the public who came along on occasion and spoke so passionately about the various issues that were of interest to them. So yes, I do reserve my right to speak, but many thanks to all concerned in getting us through this municipal year at the OSP. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Do I have any other councillor wishing to make comment or question relating to the OSP minutes, as it were? Councillor Condacor?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It is always very useful to have OSPs. They cover a vast amount of stuff, as you can see from the three reports. And it is, or should be, the place where backbenchers have an impact, can have working groups and get stuff done. And I must say, I have been disappointed by the fact that we haven't actually changed anything in any of the three OSPs this year. If you look at the recommendations, apart from occasionally thanking people, we haven't actually done anything to actually change our borough for the better. So I do hope going forward the OSPs will be more effective. I hope that more stuff will go to the OSPs before they go to Cabinet, so we have some pre-scrutiny. There's things like a lot of the housing report, the suicide report, very good report, very interesting. But yeah, that sort of thing should be going to the OSPs, and it's not been getting through to them. The other thing I'd like to just mention is we did a council call for action. We had 2 of them this year, which are very rare, but they're really important things to get things moving when things get stalled. One was about the King's Home, and the other one was about Cleaver Gardens. And we had meetings with officers, and Dawn Dawson and the chair and the vice chair had meetings about the Cleaver Gardens situation, which is great that we've got it moving forward. But I think the role of the call for action should have been put in here, because that was a kick along the process to try and get the county and the borough moving forward on this. And I say a lot of the time we don't achieve much, and I think that kick up the backside to get the county and the borough working forward was very useful. So I'm great fan of OSPs, but I think we need to get more bang for our buck effectively. More stuff should go to the OSPs so we actually discuss it before it goes to Cabinet and we make better decisions. We keep getting told measure twice, cut once. And actually one of the measurements should be reports should go to an OSP, the OSP should make recommendations and it should go to Cabinet, or reports should go to Cabinet and then the OSP calls it in. So actually we have 2 looks, one from the administration and one from the backbenchers. And we've not been doing that well enough. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Councillor Clark, would you like to respond? Or Councillor Wilson? Councillor Colby?
I wasn't going to bother saying anything, but as Cleaver Gardens has been mentioned, I can categorically tell you that you didn't have anything to do with Cleaver Gardens. That was done by my team, and actually it was done quite quietly and quite diligently, and we just got on with it. So there was no pushing along, no nothing. You might want to believe that, you might want to tell people that, but it's not true. It was you had nothing to do with Cleaver Gardens. Neither did the previous incumbent of my position or anybody else. It was dealt with as an issue on my watch by my team, and they got on with it and they dealt with it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cape.
Mr. Mayor, I'm a little bit disappointed in Councillor Condacor's analysis of what OSPs have done. I mean, I've only been doing this for 2 years now, and I never expected to change the world. However, on the OSPs that I've sat on, we've managed to get the Armed Forces Covenant now as an action, which was never on it before. We've plugged gaps between OSPs on S106 and biodiversity money. We've done planning policy on mass and camouflage, which was revisited. And also tying into the armed forces again, due to questions that were asked across health OSPs, it is now becoming a more regularly reported and measured item on all of the reports. And North Warwickshire has actually, Warwickshire have actually achieved £100,000 in funding towards forces, veterans, mental health. So I'm not sure what OSPs he was sitting on.
Thank you, Councillor Cape, for that clarification. Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to say anything because I'm a great supporter of scrutiny panels, but there is a considerable amount of work still left on the work programmes for all scrutiny panels, which is quite unusual. We usually try to bring them all to an end by the end of the year. And as for Cleaver Gardens, it was actually me that started it, and it was me that got it there. So it doesn't matter how many times you tell a lie, Councillor Golby, it was me. Thank you.
Indeed, Councillor Golby.
I can tell you that I wasn't telling a lie. You might have done work in the past, but it failed. It was my team under my watch that didn't fail. The proof is in the pudding. You didn't fix it, my team did. End of story.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. In which case, Councillor Shepherd, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank the scrutiny panels for all the work they've done, in particular, obviously, the council calls for action, which the chair took forward. I do hope for a speedy resolution in there, and hope that it's not going to come back again from that. But could I also ask that when this report's done again, that actually the writing needs to be slightly bigger?
Point taken on that one. I appreciate what you're saying. It's yeah, the eyesight gets a bit more strained, doesn't it, as one gets a little bit older. I think that's just an admin situation that probably can be dealt with. Yes, thank you for that. In which case we shall move to the vote on that one. Unless there's any else. Sorry, Councillor Clark. Sorry, apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, sorry. Mr. Mayor, I would agree. The councillor call for action are important to this council, to all councillors, and they do actually achieve good things moving forward. I was pleased to work with the councillor in relation to the King's Home. It was superseded by some of the actions that the owner took, but hopefully that will now resolve itself in the shorter term rather than long term, and I would hate for it to have to come back to council again before action is taken. It is something I'm monitoring myself to ensure that hopefully some action is taken sooner rather than later, but it's not under our remit to actually demolish the premises, as we don't have that purview to do. So, but I will keep on top of that, Mr. Mayor. As I say, not any more to add to the reports, but move as printed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. In which case we shall go to the vote. We to accept the reports as stated in the agenda. All those in favour of those reports? Thanking you. Those against? And abstentions? That is carried. Thank you. So we move forward to item number 12, Recommendations from Cabinet and other committees. I ask Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whilst it's in the name of business and regeneration, it's more a tidying up exercise, I would suggest, this recommendation. So, as part of Grayson Place, we have set up a new limited company to administer the hotel, and it's standard procedure in a lot of cases to do that. But it means that the council, as the solitary share owner, needs to have a mechanism for scrutinising that committee. Now, we already have the NABCEL shareholder committee to do the work for NABCEL, but then that raises the question, what do we do for Grayson Place MBBC Limited? Do we set up another shareholder committee, or do we look at merging it into one? And it's my considered opinion that actually having two committees is a waste of time and money and effort, whereas we already have a committee that does the work for NABCEL, so let's expand its remit to look at the Grayson Place company, but also indeed any other companies which we may or may not set up in the future. So it's effectively turning it from the NABCEL shareholder committee into the shareholder committee. And also it may be an ideal place to consider the work of the Sherborne company, which we do with recycling, as we have the new multi-use materials recycling facility based in Coventry, which we are a 1/8 owner of, 9 or 8% share, because it's divided up on our proportion by amount of waste we put in. So instead of having two or three separate committees, to myself and Cabinet, it made eminent sense to actually just have one overall committee which scrutinises any and all companies that this council may set up. So it's just really a tidying up exercise, Mr. Mayor. I should hope it would get unanimous consent, because it is basically just making the best use of our resources. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wilson, do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Croft. Do I have any members wish to speak on this matter? Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for looking at me first. I've obviously got a lot of interest in the hotel particularly, and many years ago when the new administration came in, we were told that the Hilton Group would be running the hotel, and I kept pointing to the Stockton Hotel Company, which is owned by Stockton Municipal Council, and it now seems we're going to follow exactly that same model. And if you'd listened to me 2 years ago, you could have set up the company 2 years earlier and sorted out a lot of the arrangements, rather than this sort of last minute, oh dear, we need to set a limited company up. And it's interesting how that works, because the hotel up there cost about 16 million and was devalued to 12 million when obviously they got their figures wrong. So they've lost about 4 million on the capital value of the hotel. But the operating firm runs roughly at break even. And the reason for that is the level of the lease is set so it doesn't generate capital gains, and you're not paying capital gains tax. You know, you want roughly a zero profit for the operating company. But it's fascinating how it all works, and I think lessons would have been learned if we'd have admitted that's how it was going to work and actually had some scrutiny and saw the good things and the bad things that happened in Stockton. Because I say the way they've arranged it, they've got a break-even or slightly profitable company, that's the trading company, that pays capital gains tax if it, not capital gains tax, corporation tax if it makes a profit, and then the council effectively leases the hotel to the company. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The hotel is running a year late. We know I asked a question in September 2021 when it was supposed to be completed late 2022, early 23. So it's running exactly a year behind where it's supposed to be. And there's obviously a massive loss in that, because we've obviously lost a year of income. And the other thing in these reports is it talks about borrowing and how the balance of £72 million which is expected to come through council borrowing is mentioned. I keep mentioning we needed to borrow at sensible times, and I get told we shouldn't borrow too early. We're not allowed to borrow too early. But clearly, when we signed the contract to build a £20 million hotel and the invoices started coming in, we should have started blending our borrowing in so that some of our borrowing, at least, would have been at 2% before Liz Truss crashed the economy. We now face this £73 million being borrowed post the trust era at 5%, which has totally wrecked all our economics. So I'm actually quite good at predicting the future. I can't predict exactly what's going on, but one thing I do know is if the interest rates are 2%, it's a good idea to start borrowing some money at 2% rather than risking all your eggs in assuming they'll still be 2% in 3 or 4 years' time. And it was mentioned about predicting Wilko's going under. We have bicycles. We go into Wilko's to buy our tyres. Wilko's was devoid of stock for months and months and months before it went under because the people delivering stock into Wilko's would no longer supply because of its credit rating. So I think we need to be smarter on these projects. I think we need to go downtown and try and shop in some of these shops because we know when they're going to go broke, when they run out of tyres to fix your inner tubes, fix your punctures. I am really annoyed that we keep making these mistakes. I was around when Woolworths was bought and we gave £1.6 million to TJUs, who then went into administration. I'm furious that we've spent this money or lost this money being trapped in a lease to Wilko's when we knew, any sensible person, you read any newspaper or financial page, Wilko's was in distress. I wish all these projects well, but we need to be more sensible. We need to think more before we do them. And to actually say we should think more is not being anti-development. The Grayson Place we're now planning on doing is very similar to the Grayson Place I would have done if I ran the council 3 years ago. It is a more modest size. It doesn't have the multi-storey car park, which was a disaster. And I hope in taking this forward, we'll actually have a public consultation meeting with the plans put out of the new Grayson Place, and we can all see if we like where the bus stops, the cycling, the car parking, and actually measure the plan against what the public thinks before we go to the architects and put a planning application in. I don't want to object to the new Grayson Place design. I want it to be a design where we have buy-in. I want it to be a design where we have cycle routes, where we have a bus stop that you don't have to walk across car parks and get run over to get to the cinema. I want the disabled ramp to be in the right...
Excuse me, Mrs. Condacor, please. Mrs. Condacor.
Anyway,
thank you.
My last point, Mr. Mayor, if I may, one of the key things that went wrong with Grayson Place before was disabled access. The multi-storey car park and where the disabled ramps were meant it dumped you out into Roanway Ringway. So please, when you do all this project, have a look at the disabled routes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Croft? Councillor? Oh, yeah. Respond to the question. Yes. Councillor Shepherd wishes to speak. Okay. Councillor Shepherd, then, your question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've mixed views on this document, mainly because there's been no call-in, there's been no scrutiny. You've moved forward to putting in a limited company, and there's been no discussion, certainly with not opposition members, as far as I'm aware. As I said, I'm divided on this because of the lack of scrutiny on it. Because you're saying about putting it in with NABCEL, you don't know how it works. I sit on the NABCEL shareholder, so that declaration is in, obviously, then, Mr. Mayor. But you've not worked out how it works, and actually to sit down and send it to scrutiny would have been the way forward in terms of getting the little glitches out that we might be coming across. So I've got some concern, and I would hope that if it goes through, that you decide that, you know, besides the NABCEL committee, actually it needs a little bit of buy-in from a scrutiny panel as well.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Any other questions from any of the other members? In which case, I shall go to Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I don't have a great deal to say because I've said it on other occasions, and I hope we can get through it without interruptions from the gallery. I remember back in the day the former Councillor Heatley making a few predictions on that score, and he was quite right. On the point about learning from the Stockton, Councillor Conticle, we're very happy to know we're already doing it. In fact, I think the 151 officer has had meetings with the 151 officer at Stockton, and we've consulted, and we've we've got what I believe the term is best practice from that quarter. Obviously, Councillor Condacor is not going to be involved in those discussions because, quite frankly, Councillor Condacor is not in charge of this issue. Councillor Condacor's role is to turn up here and occasionally ask some questions. Mr. Mayor, he talked about, and there's been an issue with Councillor Condacor, which is, I believe the term that used to be used in politics was Captain Hindsight. And that's pretty much been Councillor Condacor's role. He cast himself as Cassandra, but really he's been Captain Hindsight. Oh, I wouldn't have done that. Well, that's not much use, Mr. Mayor. If we had done as Councillor Condacor has just said he would have done and proceeded with the full programme a year ago, which he's now complaining is a year behind schedule, then we really would have been in the soup financially, because we have just spent a period of our time in office pausing the programme to manage the borrowing costs and manage the cost of the regeneration programme down, so there is no additional general fund pressure. That is the benchmark that we set. Councillor Condacor has just said, oh, we should have done it a year ago. Well, there's no good having income if it's not offsetting the borrowing costs. So we couldn't have proceeded with that. That would have been ridiculous. And the same point goes for his idea. He's like, oh well, I would have borrowed when it was cheap. Well, Mr. Mayor, apart from the fact that just borrowing and sitting on it would have led to sort of dead interest. We'd have just been paying dead money on the interest. We wouldn't have had any income to offset it with. I made the point on a previous occasion. I mean, I'm not currently a homeowner, but I'm not going to take out a mortgage now just on the off chance that I find somewhere I like. And that is the kind of financial recklessness that Councillor Condacor sort of tries to push on us after the fact, Mr. Mayor. And I do point out that if he had been so good at predictions, I'm sure he could have made some money on the stock market or the lottery and saved us all this financial issue. But I didn't have much further to add.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. You wish to make a point?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. 2 points per explanation. I didn't say borrow before we needed it. I said borrow as the bills came in. As in, if you're building your own house, you borrow as the builder gives you an invoice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. No, I'm very sorry. We've passed that point. Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I must remember next time I go to Asda and they run out of cheese, it must be closing down. So we hear that a Green Council would have done this, it would have done that, it would have done the other in terms of regeneration. Well, I can tell you what a Green Council would have done. There would have been no borough plan review because they would have taken away £100,000. Fact. They would have spent £1 million on new windows for the town hall. Fact. And their borrowing, or proposed borrowing, would have resulted in our Section 151 officer issuing a Section 114 notice, i.e. bankruptcy. So I'll take no lessons from Councillor Condacor on sound financial management. Where it comes to Councillor Shepherd's point, we have a company which is doing relatively well in NABCEL. So we have a template to follow, which is exactly what we have been doing throughout this process. Now, I'm long in the tooth here enough to know that when NABCEL was set up, there was no scrutiny. Myself as the Deputy Leader of the Opposition and the late Councillor O'Brien as the Leader of the Opposition were not consulted on the setting up of NABCEL. We were presented with a report to Cabinet. It then came here, and that was it. We were fortunate enough to have a seat on the board, which is exactly what we have offered to the opposition. That was the instruction I gave to officers. As far as I'm aware, that has been taken up. So there is that, hopefully, cross-party buy-in. So we have followed exactly what the party opposite did when they were in control. And now there is it does feel a bit like crying wolf, Mr. Mayor. We have done everything by the book, by the precedent which was set here. We're doing all right with NABCEL, and this is a way of actually following the good practice that the council has established. And so by just tying up the two shareholder committees into one as a shareholder committee overall for any and all companies that we set up, I just think that is plain, sensible, lean management. And I don't see actually why it needs to be opposed. It's just good housekeeping. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. In which case I move that forward to the vote. All those in favour of the proposal? Thank you for that. Anybody against? We will do. Yes, indeed. And I'm assuming there's no abstentions on that basis, in which case that is carried. So we move forward to item 12B, which is the review of the borough plan, examination in public. I call upon Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Borough Plan Review was submitted to the Secretary of State and the Planning Inspectorate for examination on the 12th of February. So after 3 years of very hard work, we're now in the final stage of the review process. 2 inspectors have been allocated for the Borough Plan Review, and officers are working with them at the moment through an independent programme officer to arrange an examination in public in the coming months, hopefully as early as July. Some modifications have already been suggested by the Council to the documents following the responses from the publication consultation which we held last year. It'll be up to inspectors to consider these suggested modifications and to recommend any further ones that they feel are necessary in order to make this plan sound and legally compliant. The Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act specifically requires that inspectors are allowed to require any modifications they deem fit during the examination process. So this council must therefore give consent to the inspectors for them to provide modifications and to allow officers to agree to these modifications during that examination process. Without this facility, the inspectors could consider the plan unsound at the outset. The recommendation is therefore as set out in the report, so that the inspectors are requested to recommend any modifications they deem necessary, and secondly, that these modifications can be agreed with the planning inspectors during the examination, using delegated powers by officers in consultation with the portfolio holder for planning. Any agreed main modifications will then need to be consulted on by the council, and any responses will have to be fed back to the inspectors. That's all part of the process. Subject to the inspectors considering the plan is sound and legally compliant, the plan can then be adopted by the council. So I move the recommendation as printed.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Do I have a seconder for that recommendation?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I second that and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Do I have any member wishing to speak on the matter? Councillor Condacor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is the final item of my final full council, so it'll be interesting that it's borough plan. We have a borough plan. It's based on far too high a housing target, and the party opposite said they were going to submit a plan in February 2023, i.e. a year earlier. If that had been 6 months late, that would have still been a useful plan, because the 3 planning inquiries we're currently fighting around Wellington and St Nicholas, and the one you might be fighting for Bedworth Woodlands, would have had the advantage of that plan being adopted by now. If instead that plan is as late as it is today, it will come after these 3 planning inquiries in Wellington and St Nicholas, and may very well come too late to save the Bedworth Woodlands. My very point when we were talking at the budget over a year ago, and at the borough plan meeting even before that, is we either do a plan quickly and fast to give us some protection, or we do it well. The current halfway house of doing a bit better plan in a moderate amount of time means we've spent all this money, but it hasn't protected all the sites in Bulkington, all the sites in Wellington, the sites in St Nicholas and Bedworth Woodlands. It is too slow to do the protection job, but actually not good enough to get the infrastructure you keep saying we should have. And we clearly do need. I'm passionate about getting better infrastructure for Wellington. I want there to be the Wellington entrance to the railway station. I'm passionate about getting Stocking Ford station opened, so actually the west of Nuneaton has the benefit of better connectivity. There's so much we could put in a plan if we had a carefully designed greener plan, more solar panels, more dealing with the issues of sewage, flooding, drainage. Those flood alleviation projects you say are too expensive. Having done the plan more carefully and with more expertise, we could have got developers to pay for some of the flood mitigation. So it was a halfway house, a 2-2 borough plan, and it was too slow to be useful and not really good enough to actually be useful either. The final thing I would really like to say is we need to be honest with figures. I've always published my figures, I've done projections. I did work out the Coventry population statistics was wrong, and I was right and ONS was wrong. But now we have leaflets going round saying the Conservatives are going to want to build less than 450 houses a year. Councillor Smith is putting forward a plan for 560. So that's 20% more than what's in your leaflets. And then the planning inspector and the developers will try and come to a figure which may be back to 702. Yeah, planning process means you're giving delegated authority to the planning inspector and the officers to effectively negotiate the next borough plan. And like with the previous borough plan, things get put back in. So I'm very concerned about us giving delegated authority without that check and balance. And that's why, Councillor Smith, I asked about, will there be a borough plan meeting around that time? And I'm pleased you said there will be, because there does need to be some member buy-in to the changes our officers might need to make. I really have a hard time in this chamber. I'm dreadfully, I'm probably Aspergic or high-functioning autistic, because I love numbers. I do get things right. And I passionately like getting projections right. I've been here for 12 years, and if you look back at the videos, I've not been too bad. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Connachor. Councillor Rob Tromans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to do my usual thing of having to correct the nonsense of the previous speaker and how wrong all of that was. I'll leave that to my to my colleague, the portfolio holder, Councillor Smith. What I would like to say, Mr. Mayor, is this could not be more apt. The last item on this council, the last item I will speak on as a councillor, is the first thing that got me involved in local politics, and that is the borough plan. And across the whole borough, and I think the borough plan is such a big issue, it speaks to what local authorities are about, because it's far more than just housing numbers. And I think it's fair to say that when I became involved in local politics, and a lot of my colleagues did, it was because of the unfairness that the public was feeling and being very clear about with the original borough plan, the one that the controlling Labour group at the time brought forward. It totally disregarded the wishes of residents. It was not sound in any way. The inspector labelled it, or at the inspection it was labelled as third rate, and rightly so. It inflicted a huge amount of pain on certain areas, my own, St Nicholas, Weddington, needlessly. It wasn't fair or reasonable in any way, and that drove me and others here to get into local politics to fix this. So how grateful am I now that we have a sound borough plan that has exhaustive evidence that's been brought forward to support it. Not just the housing numbers, but everything that goes with that. A borough plan is about planning in its entirety. For one example, not just the regeneration of town centres, but the employment. Pointless building thousands more houses if you're not going to deliver any jobs locally, because then everybody would have to travel and we'd just become an even bigger dormitory town or towns. We don't want that. So I'm delighted that this borough plan has more than twice the employment land in it that the previous one did, and less houses. So we're getting the balance right. It's being sorted out. There's proper regard for infrastructure, something that's been so missing in Weddington. I know some of that is a county function and whatever, but we had an abject failure for the 8 years before I was the county councillor, talking about bus stops that actually I'm paying to have delivered this week. A whole bunch of those things weren't included. And so now we have proper infrastructure plans. We even have design layout plans for new estates. The plan is so much better more detailed, more robust, sound, and much more importantly, fair for the residents of the borough. It's taken people's views into account. We had so many consultations, and then we had a further one, as I'm sure Councillor Smith will refer to. And I turned up to those and listened to what people said, and we talked about it in the borough plan meetings, and we made sure that that was included. It's sound, it's evidence-based, it's completely turned it around, and contrary to what was said before, it has legal weight under the planning. Although it's not fully adopted, it is a finalised borough plan, and that has formed part of our defence for the appeals that we faced in Weddington and other areas. A borough that doesn't have proper control of its planning and lets things drift and decline is what we had before. Regeneration, a proper borough plan, proper regard for making the 106 money really work, and we've heard, you know, of all of the good work that's been done to improve the open spaces and the parks. The best job and the biggest spend that we've done in 30 years. All of that's become possible because we've changed from an attitude of decline to a new group that controls the borough, of one of regeneration, improvement, soundness, evidence-based, not half-baked stuff, not decline, but really positive stuff going forward. And the electorate bought into that. So I'm pleased that as I am ending my career on the borough, and won't be standing in for the borough, although I'm going to carry on public service representing on the county and the county at the West Midlands Combined Authority, I am pleased that we have made this huge step, the biggest single thing in local politics, and got a new borough plan, got it right, and I commend all of the officers and all of the people that contributed in a positive way to that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Troman. Councillor Evans? Thank you.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The borough plan and the devastating policies within it imposed by the previous Labour administration have been an issue of great contention during my 6-year term on this council. Residents should never forget the words of the barrister hired to defend the crazy borough plan after it was referred to as being a third-rate plan, having been based upon flawed ONS statistics. The actions and work of the Labour group could only be described as shoddy. Secret deals with Coventry City Council behind closed doors to surrender Bedworth's Greenbelt, public consultation that could at best be described as limited, and a complete dereliction of their duties. We know the decision to include the Bedworth Woodlands within the borough plan was a political decision taken behind closed doors, a decision not based upon sound evidence, rather a decision to shore up the Labour vote in their marginal wards. I welcome the report this evening presented to the Council, which highlights the real difference between having a Conservative council which has had just 3 years in office to a Labour council which was in charge for 45 years and achieved absolutely diddly squat. The Conservative administration promised the people of Bedworth that the borough plan would be reviewed on day one in taking office. That is exactly what we achieved, and that is why the borough plan is now sitting before the planning inspectorate. And to those who say that the process has taken too long, I say you may well have a point, but let's just remember this. The planning inspectorate at the last inspection, under the Labour Council, made it clear that the borough plan had to be reviewed immediately upon being ratified by councillors. Labour sat on their hands, wasted time, and that is what drove the delay, which my good friend Councillor Smith has struggled to navigate. And so I welcome the report that has been presented to full council this evening, and I hope that members will support it. As these will be my final remarks in this chamber, having served the people of the Slough ward for 6 years, I'd like to place on record my sincere thanks to the constituents for the support they have given me during my term in office. I've enjoyed endless ward surgeries, coffee mornings, as well as dealing with hundreds of pieces of casework. I also want to pass on my thanks to the officers on this council for the often unrecognised behind the work stuff that they are doing here. In particular, I'd like to specifically say thank you to Kevin Hollis and Katie Boyce for their professional advice during my tenure as a cabinet member. Working alongside them to secure £15 million for Bedworth from the Levelling Up Fund was probably the highlight of my councillor career, and I think the three of us achieved great things for Bedworth. Sometimes the Nuneaton and Bedworth Conservative group has felt like a second family, and it has been a real honour to work alongside such brilliant colleagues. I wish all of my councillor colleagues, regardless of political affiliation, all the best in the future, and I hope that the residents of the Slough ward will get behind Councillor Markham and Councillor Walsh on the 2nd of May.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chetrovic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Right, we've heard quite a lot tonight. The first thing I've got to say is, Councillor Condicourt, if you could tell me Saturday's lottery numbers, I would really appreciate that, because you seem to know every other set of future numbers. So any hints and tips, greatly received. Just send me an email, okay? Don't share them in public. Much appreciated. I do have to challenge some of what you've said. First of all, you talk about the numbers. And you talk about sort of the ONS numbers. I believe it was Mel Gehring who, obviously one of your Green colleagues, who actually came up, because I was sat here when he delivered the presentation to the planning inspector at the stage 1 hearing. So I was sat pretty much where you're sat right now, listening to that. So I think, you know, taking credit for the work that he did there is slightly bad form. I would also say, in terms of the immediate review, it didn't happen. We didn't get an immediate review. So, again, I was sat in the public gallery at the time, and again, it's the thing that got me into local politics was opposing the borough plan. And I was sat there on the night when it was sort of put out there, and we had counter proposals put forward about the wording of the review. And we sort of put it forward, and then we had to wait 14 months for that review process to actually begin. 14 months. So we could technically be 14 months further down the line than we are now if it had started 14 months earlier, even if it started 6 or 7 months earlier. When we did start that review, though, I believe most of the meetings, I think it was only 3 or 4 meetings that happened, and they were mainly focused on the traveller site issue, and even then nothing was resolved. So I have to give full credit to Councillor Smith and the team under his sort of leadership as portfolio holder, the sterling work they've done. Now, I have been a critic of this. I have sort of said that what we need is something equivalent to a Land Rover, something that's robust and reliable, but with a very quick build time, or a fairly quick build time. What we've ended up with is a Rolls Royce. Okay, a watertight, solid, dependable plan that goes above and beyond, and that will see this borough through over the coming sort of decade and beyond. So that's what we've ended up with. Yes, I would have liked it to have been a few months quicker in getting it, and I would say the voting record would probably show that I did vote against it sometimes, because I wanted it through quicker, but the end product we've ended up with is excellent. And if we're going to talk about where the blame lies, it's in the procrastination that we had from the previous administration in not getting this off the ground sooner. And if they'd have worked with all the parties, if they'd have listened and worked with the residents and local MPs, we might not be where we are today, and we might not be having to sort of face the challenges that we've got lined up ahead of us over the next few months. But I am pretty certain that what we have produced will stand up, and it will stand up to the rigour of inspection. Okay, and I say time will tell, whether it does or doesn't. And I really think we have got a product that will take us forward. So I'd like to thank you, Councillor Smith, and again, if you could pass the thanks on to your team as well. So it's good to see that we have delivered it. Normally, you might expect a council to have like a 4-year term, a 2-year or a 4-year term. We've been in the position of having a 3-year term, okay? And, to achieve it in that time, I'm pretty pleased overall with what's happened. And I hope that we will still save a number of sites. I hope they will still be saved and that they will not be built upon. And last night at planning, which I know Councillor Condicourt was there for, will sort of, bear us out on that one. Okay, because that will be the test case that comes forward, and we will see what we will see from that. But well done, and I think I'm very happy to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tretrick. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It feels a bit like deja vu, really. with Councillor Condacor. I mean, he was first elected 12 years ago for the Weddington ward on a pledge to stop the building on the fields in Weddington, and not one single solitary brick has been stopped. It's only the Conservative administration that is getting anywhere near stopping the unnecessary bricks being laid in the green fields of Nuneaton and Bedworth. Now, Councillor Condacor is right. He has the right diagnosis, but the wrong actual, well, the right symptom, but the wrong diagnosis. It is slightly late, but that is because we have had two big obstacles in our way as a Conservative administration. The first was the Labour administration did, to coin Councillor Evans' phrase, diddly squat. There was nothing virtually when we took control of this administration to get anywhere near a review of the borough plan. Councillor Smith effectively picked that up from a standing start. We had to go full pelt, and full pelt we did. But the other reason is that of all the evidence we have to put towards the inspector, and there are mountains and mountains of evidence that we have to put to the inspector to prove that the plan is legally sound under the Act, which is actually a Labour, an old Labour Act of Parliament that we're having to work with here for local plans. Reams and reams of paper. Where do these reams and reams of paper come from? They come from experts. What do experts cost? They cost money. And what did Councillor Condacor propose to revoke from the Green Budget in 2022? The money. So without that money, we would have got nowhere. If Councillor Condacor had had his way, there would be none of these policies being refreshed and updated, because there would be no money to pay for them. Now, that means that we'd have been stuck with the Labour third-rate plan. And he has stood here many a time and said, no, we need to change that. You can't have it both ways, Mr. Mayor. It's just mind-boggling that people go out there and try and peddle this to the residents when they say one thing and actually do another. But we got those reports done. We are now in a position to put up a robust and solid argument about our review. And that's what matters with the inspector. Do I wish he had got there sooner? Of course I do. But I have dealt with the hand I was played, and so has Councillor Smith. And if this was a game of poker, he'd have been winning, Mr. Mayor, because actually he's playing a blinder with this review. Now, we are the only administration in this council's history to actually stand up for the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth against unwanted, unnecessary, and quite frankly, crazy development that has been proposed, which would literally take the housing right up to the border of the A5 on Weddington, and then also with the Longshoot and others, 1,800 houses. We have set aside, thanks to Councillor Croft's sterling financial stewardship, £250,000 to meet the potential costs of those appeals. Not because we want to fight them, but because we have to fight them for the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth. And I can categorically assure the residents that we will be going for costs. If we win, Mr. Mayor, the instruction from us as the Cabinet members to the officers and to the King's Council is crystal clear. If the developers lose, they have made us go through all of this. They pay for it, not the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth. That, of course, is a decision for the inspector. But every other occasion in this council's history, we've rolled over, let the developer tickle our tummy, and we pay for it. No longer under this administration. Now, this plan that we're taking through tonight improves greatly on the situation that we inherited 3 years ago. It actually protects residents who didn't have any protection. That is what happened last night at the Woodlands planning application, because, in my view, and I believe it is the view of the other members, of course, they each had their own reasons for voting, but my reason primarily was that the existing borough plan, as passed by Labour, and two of the Cabinet members are sat there tonight, Mr. Mayor, who actually pushed it through, their report is dangerously out of date and puts us further at risk. And it's only because ours is up to date with the relevant evidence that I believe we have a defendable argument before the planning inspector to try and save the woodlands. Whitestone Golf Drive has been sacrificed to Coventry's Labour administration. Catherine Morton, the old head of planning, said that it was only put in because we have now accepted Coventry's overspill. And other places, Bulkington, for example, I know specifically that sites in there were put in just because of the Coventry overspill. Hawkesbury put in as well. But it is only the Conservatives that can be trusted with the future of this borough, Mr Mayor, or we go back to the future with the Labour Party that sacrificed it before.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think my colleagues have done a pretty good job in rebutting some of the criticism. I think we'd all like to have seen this borough plan come forward in much quicker time. We started off with an ambitious timetable. It would have been great to meet it. Unfortunately, the rest of the world didn't move as quick. There were delays with the sub-regional headner. We could do nothing until we got that. But because all of our neighbouring local authorities were sitting on their hands a little bit, it was delay after delay, and we couldn't move forward without that data. I think the team have done an amazing job to deliver this in 3 years, given the circumstances. And I'm very proud of the plan. It's a solid plan. We've updated 15 major out-of-date policies. And I say they are major policies that were out of date already when we took over. House numbers. Currently, we're having to deliver something like between 800 and 900 houses a year because of early slippage. That's being cut to 545 a year. That will significantly improve our situation in terms of 5-year land supply, which is something that we've come in great criticism for, and that's all down to Labour's failed borough plan. There's no Coventry overspill in our plan. Our plan is for us. It's not for Coventry, it's for this borough. There's no green belt in the plan. Brownfield first is our policy. So there's no more green belt. Swathes of it were cut by the Labour plan. There's nothing in ours. We've managed, hopefully, to save 2 sites. That's all we could do, is save 2 sites. The Woodlands, as you've already heard, was refused last night. I'm hopeful that that site and the remaining site in Bolkington will be saved when this plan's adopted. And we've had criticism that this plan doesn't carry weight. Well, I rebuke that. I've listened in the last 3 weeks to our King's Council successfully defending the emerging plan. It does carry weight, and he's made a good point of prematurity at the recent appeal. Prematurity in the sense that these 1,900 houses that have come forward, speculative developments by 3 different developers, really have come forward to try and beat this borough plan process. But we've solidly defended it, the prematurity argument, on the basis that we do have a plan coming forward. It is accepted it's a very advanced stage. It is with the inspectorate, and it does carry weight. When this plan is adopted, we will have a sound 5-year housing land supply that will be defended. We've also doubled the employment land, I think nearly doubled it. The sub-regional headner called for something just over 40 hectares of employment land. We're putting in 80 hectares of employment land to create the jobs, to boost the economy, and create jobs for the people that are going to live in these new houses. So I'm very proud of the plan we've got. I thank my colleagues for all the positive comments, and I recommend the motion as printed.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. So at that point, I shall move that to the vote. All those in favour of the report as written? Thank you. All those against? We will indeed, Mr. Councillor Condacourt. And any abstentions? Could you record my vote as well? We will indeed, Councillor Evans. Thank you very much indeed. In which case that is carried. As that is the last item on the agenda, I would like to thank you all for your attendance and thank you all for your input, those present and not. I thank you, and all those who are not present at this moment in time. I'd like to thank all the officers. I would like to thank the committee services for all the work they do to support all the committees and obviously any meetings. But I'd also like to thank our Chief Executive, who this will be his last full council. I realise you're obviously at the mayor making ceremony, but in terms of full council, this will be your last, and I would like to thank you on behalf of everybody else.